Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, philosophers. Welcome to video 13 of Philosophy of Science through the lens of medicine. In the last video, I said it was video 11. It was, in fact, video 12. In the previous lecture, we met medicine at its least reassuring. Bloodletting, lobotomies, poisonous antidotes, and doctors who remained impressively confident whilst the patient became progressively less alive. Today, we ask whether medicine was merely bad in the past or whether modern medicine still deserves less confidence than we give it. This isn't science versus someone treating meningitis with lavender and determination. It's a dispute within the philosophy of science. Jacob Stegenga argues for medical nihilism, even wrote a book by that title. Alex Broadbent and others accept much of his diagnosis but reject his conclusion. Medical nihilism says that we should have very little confidence in the effectiveness of medical interventions. Stegenga doesn't claim that nothing works. Antibiotics, insulin, anesthesia, and some surgeries are obvious successes. Nor does he endorse anti-vaccination campaigns or alternative medicine, particularly anyway. His standards would hit homeopathy even harder than mainstream medicine. Homeopathy doesn't survive strict evidential scrutiny. It evaporates, which is very on brand. Alex Broadbent distinguishes between weak nihilism, where medicine is less beneficial than assumed, from stronger claims that medicine provides no net benefit or even does more harm than good. So before accepting medical nihilism, ask which dose of medical nihilism is being prescribed. So Stegenga has this argument called the master argument, and his case is essentially Bayesian. Let H be the hypothesis that an intervention is effective and E the evidence supporting it. First, the prior probability of H, the hypothesis, should be low. Most candidate drugs fail. Some approved treatments are later rejected, barely outperform placebo or improve a surrogate marker without producing much benefit that patients actually care about. Lowering a laboratory number is not automatically improving a life. Add the causal complexity of disease, and the dream of a precise magic bullet begins to look optimistic. Second, apparently favorable evidence may be likely whether the treatment works or not. Trials contain choices: which patients and outcomes to select, when to stop, how to analyze subgroups, whether to report relative or absolute risk, and whether an awkward negative study ever sees daylight. Meta-analysis doesn't remove these decisions. Sometimes it just gives them a spreadsheet. Third, the weak and discordant evidence we often observe is not what we'd expect if H meant that the treatment was robustly effective. Combine a low prior, disappointing evidence, and a research system primed to produce positive-looking results, and our posterior confidence, that is, the confidence after we've put all of this into the equation, should remain low. The intuition is simple, even if that all sounded rather complicated. If a used car salesman tells you that the car he's trying to sell you is magnificent, it's evidence, but it is evidence you expected whether the car was magnificent or held together by a prayer. It shouldn't move your confidence very far, one way or the other. Financial incentives make the problem worse. Malleable methods tend to bend towards larger benefits and smaller harms. Trials are usually powered to find benefits. Rare or delayed harms are harder to detect. The spotlight is always on the benefit. The harms are behind the curtain, quietly setting fire to the scenery. Stegenga therefore recommends gentle medicine, therapeutic humility, less aggressive intervention when expected benefits are small, closer attention to the harms, and greater emphasis on care and prevention. This doesn't mean replacing insulin with positive thinking. It means resisting intervention merely because intervention is available. So let's look at some objections. The first one being that the conclusion outruns the evidence. Alex Broadbent argues that this critique is strongest against widely used pharmaceuticals supported mainly by industry-shaped clinical research. But medicine also contains surgery, vaccination, intensive care, public health, mechanistic reasoning, clinical experience, and care. Premises about one troubled province cannot establish nihilism about the entire country. That's like having a terrible flight and concluding that transportation has failed in general. Jeremy Howick argues that independent systematic reviews can expose exaggerated claims. Bennett Holman adds that attacks on meta-analyses sometimes overlook its safeguards or identify problems shared by other methods. A bendable tool is not automatically useless, although suspicion is sensible when the carpenter owns shares in the timber company. Objection 2 is that, as we've spoken about in previous lectures, context matters. Some argue that Stegenga's probabilities are too decontextualized. A medical intervention is not a homogeneous category. Whether a treatment works depends on the mechanism, the population, the dosage, the outcome, and supporting conditions. A drug may act on a mechanism found in only a minority of patients, tested in a heterogeneous group, and responders are diluted by non-responders, producing a tiny average effect. Yet, for the relevant subgroup, the prior probability of benefit may be really high. This connects with Nancy Cartwright's distinction between works somewhere, works generally, and works for me. An RCT, remember, randomized controlled trials, they may establish the first without establishing the third. The human body, inconveniently, hasn't read the protocol. The blue bus problem makes the same point. Suppose 75% of buses in a town belong to one company. That is important when identifying a bus involved in an accident. But once we have a camera recording, matching paint, or a suspiciously apologetic driver, the general base rate shouldn't dominate. Check the Broadbent reading for that. Likewise, a poor general record for pharmaceutical research should inform, but not replace, evidence about the treatment and the patient. Objection 3 is that Bayes can't settle the premises. Broadbent asks what H and E mean throughout the master argument. If H means the intervention produces some benefit, then favourable evidence may be likely when H is true, not low, as the argument requires. If H instead means a highly effective low-harm magic bullet, its prior probability is obviously low, but the conclusion becomes far less radical. We already knew that medical miracles were pretty rare. Moderate effectiveness is not nothing. A treatment may have serious adverse effects, yet remain rational for aggressive cancer. A small individual risk reduction may be really important across an entire population. Not a miracle does not entail not medicine. Bayes' theorem is valid. The dispute concerns what we feed into it. A formula can organize an argument, but it can't manufacture the truth of the premises. The fourth objection is that fallibility is not failure. Broadbent also argues that medicine is an inquiry directed towards cure rather than merely a box dispensing cures. Inquiry can progress by discovering mechanisms, improving diagnoses, and eliminating false hypotheses before producing successful treatments. That reply has its limits. Knowledge is progressing comforts a research funder rather more than a patient currently taking an ineffective drug. Still, therapeutic failure does not make the entire medical enterprise worthless. Upshur and Goldenberg add that medical facts are provisional, probabilistic, and value-laden. Science is corrigible, not clairvoyant. The proper response is humility, transparent uncertainty, and explicit discussion of the costs of false positives and false negatives, not collective despair. So, should we be medical nihilists? Stegenga kind of wins much of the argument. Our default confidence in many new, heavily marketed interventions is probably way too high. We should demand patient-relevant outcomes, absolute benefits, serious investigation of harms, access to unpublished evidence, independence from commercial interests, and reasons to think that a result travels from worked in a trial to likely to work for this patient. But the critics win on scope. Medicine is too heterogeneous for one global prior to settle every case. General evidence about bias can't automatically defeat strong treatment-specific mechanistic or experimental evidence. My verdict is therefore not medical nihilism, but disciplined therapeutic humility. So be skeptical of hype, not automatically of medicine, and ask yourself 4 questions. What exactly is the claimed benefit? How large is it in absolute terms? What are the harms? And why should this evidence apply here? We should trust medicine conditionally, locally and provisionally, enough to act when action is justified, but never so completely that we stop asking whether the treatment is helping the patient or merely improving the graph. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.